1 month after their destructive loop, Maya gets the same type of text from Ethan. Crazy day at work, might be late responding. But this time, instead of her scanner part immediately going into panic mode, Maya takes a deep breath and thinks, he's just having a stressful day. This isn't about me or our relationship.
What changed? Maya discovered the wise, loving leader that was inside her all along, what we call the self. And this self-energy can transform not just your relationship with your parts, but your relationship with everyone you love.
Hi, we're Tehrina and Joel Terry. We're licensed therapists here to help you heal from anxious attachment, stop chasing unavailable love, and build the secure relationships and community you deserve.
Today, we're talking about the self, the capital S self that can lead your parts with wisdom, compassion, and strength. Let's check in with Maya after that destructive loop we saw in episode 4.
The morning after typing and deleting that breakup text, Maya realized something had to change. This wasn't the first relationship where she found herself caught in this anxious-avoidant pattern, and she was tired of feeling like a victim to partners who run away.
Maya made a decision that changed everything. She called a therapist, not to fix Ethan or save the relationship, but to understand what was happening inside of her own system that kept creating these painful dynamics. In her first session, Maya told her therapist,
I love Ethan, and I want to build something healthy with him, but I can see that this pattern follows me from relationship to relationship, and I don't want to keep blaming my partners for running away. I want to understand what's happening on my side that contributes to this.
Maya's therapist introduced her to internal family systems, and for the first time, Maya began to understand her scanner, analyzer, and perfectionist parts. She learned about the exiles these parts were protecting, the 7-year-old who watched her dad withdraw, the 12-year-old who was suddenly excluded, and the teenager who learned to hide her authentic feelings. But then her therapist introduced her to something that changed everything.
Maya, there's something else in you that's not a part. There's an aspect of yourself that's wise, calm, and capable of leading all these parts with compassion. We call this the self.
Maya was skeptical.
I don't feel wise or calm. I feel anxious and confused most of the time.
Her therapist smiled.
That's because your parts have been doing all the leading. But underneath all that protection, there's something inside of you that has incredible capacity. When your parts feel safe enough to step back, your capital S self naturally emerges.
Maya's therapist explained that when people access their self, they naturally embody 8 specific qualities.
These aren't things you have to learn or develop, Maya. They're already there. When your parts trust you enough to let you lead, these qualities just show up.
The 8 qualities are calm, curious, compassionate, connected, courageous, creative, clear, and confident.
Think about a time when you felt really centered and loving, her therapist said. Maybe when you were comforting a friend or in nature or holding a baby or a kitty. In those moments, you weren't anxious or analyzing. You were just naturally wise and present. That's your self.
Maya thought about holding her friend's newborn last month. In that moment, she hadn't been scanning for problems or analyzing anything. She'd just been present, calm, and filled with love.
Oh, she said quietly, I do know that feeling.
Over the next few weeks, Maya learned to recognize when her parts were activated versus when she was in herself. Her therapist taught her to get curious about her parts instead of being controlled by them. When Maya's scanner part started monitoring Ethan's text patterns, instead of getting swept away by the anxiety, Maya learned to notice.
Oh, my scanner part is activated. I wonder what she's afraid of right now.
When her analyzer part started replaying conversations, Maya learned to say,
I see you're working so hard to figure this out. What are you trying to protect me from?
When her perfectionist part started crafting the right version of herself to present to Ethan, Maya learned to ask,
what do you think would happen if I just showed up authentically?
And as Maya learned to relate to her parts from self, something beautiful happened. She stopped testing her relationship with Ethan and started trusting it. If you find yourself constantly testing your relationships instead of trusting them, please check out our free From Testing to Trusting guide, in which we will help you discover how your anxious parts show up as protest behaviors that harm your relationships.
And as Maya learned to relate from her parts of self, something beautiful happened. She stopped testing her relationship with Ethan and started trusting it. If you find yourself constantly testing your relationships instead of trusting them, please check out our free From Testing to Trusting guide, in which we help you discover how your anxious parts show up as protest behaviors that harm your relationships.
Maya started sharing what she was learning with Ethan. She didn't try to diagnose him or fix him, but she spoke from herself about her own discoveries.
Ethan, I'm learning that when I get anxious about us, it's actually a part of me that's scared of being abandoned again. And it's not really about you or anything you're doing. It's about old wounds that haven't healed yet. I'm working on this in therapy because I don't want my fear to push you away.
Ethan was surprised by Maya's calm, non-blaming approach. Usually when she brought up relationship concerns, his system would immediately go into defense mode. But this felt different. Maya wasn't attacking or demanding. She was just sharing her own internal experience.
Maya's self-led approach began to create safety for Ethan's parts. When she stopped pursuing frantically, his withdrawal parts didn't need to activate so strongly. When she took responsibility for her own anxiety instead of making it about his behavior, his defensive parts could relax.
Maya shared the book her therapist had shared with her, We All Have Parts, by Colleen West. As Ethan read about parts and protective strategies, things started clicking. He began to recognize his own shutdown manager, independence manager, and monitoring manager.
Most importantly, Ethan started to understand his window of tolerance, how his system would go into shutdown when emotional intensity felt overwhelming. The book helped him realize he wasn't broken or incapable of intimacy. He just had parts that learned to protect him from emotional chaos.
I'm not ready for therapy yet, Ethan told Maya, but this is helping me understand why I shut down when you get emotional. It's not because I don't care. It's because my system learned that emotional intensity was dangerous.
About a month into Maya's therapy work, life presented them with the same type of challenge that had triggered their destructive loop before. Ethan was having an incredibly stressful week, work deadlines, family drama, and he was feeling maxed out.
On Wednesday, Maya texted,
"Haven't heard from you much today and feeling a bit disconnected. Can we check in tonight?"
In the past, this would have triggered Ethan's immediate shutdown. But something was different this time. Instead of his monitoring manager immediately sounding the alarm about Maya's emotional needs, Ethan found himself pausing. He could feel his parts wanting to activate, the urge to shut down, to delay, to send a brief dismissive text. But he'd been learning about these parts, and he could sense that there wasn't another option available.
From a calmer place, Ethan texted back,
"I can hear that you're feeling disconnected. And that makes sense because I've been pretty consumed with work stress. I care about staying connected with you too. Can we talk around 8? I want to give you my full attention."
This might seem like a small change, but it represents a massive shift from parts-led to self-led responding. If you've ever experienced this kind of transformation in your own relationships, where you suddenly found yourself responding from wisdom instead of reactivity, please give this video a like. It helps other people see that this kind of change is actually possible.
When Maya read Ethan's text, she felt her old parts starting to activate.
Why does he need to wait until 8? What if he's just trying to buy time to figure out how to pull away?
But Maya had been practicing relating to these parts from self. She noticed her scanner part getting activated and said to it,
"I hear you trying to protect me. You're worried this delay means he's pulling away. But let's look at his actual words. He acknowledged my feelings, validated them, and set a specific time to connect. This is what security looks like, not abandonment."
Her parts settled, and Maya texted back from self,
"That sounds perfect. Take care of yourself today, and I'll look forward to connecting tonight."
That evening, instead of their usual pattern where Maya's anxiety would trigger Ethan's shutdown, something beautiful happened. Maya approached the conversation from self.
"Ethan, I noticed I started feeling disconnected when our communication got brief, and I realized that's my old pattern. I'm not making you responsible for fixing my anxiety, but I wanted to share what was happening for me and hear how you've been feeling.
Ethan felt his shutdown manager wanting to activate. Emotional conversations still felt challenging.
But Maya's calm, non-blaming approach created safety for his parts to relax slightly.
I have been pretty overwhelmed this week.
Ethan said, staying present instead of shutting down.
When you texted about feeling disconnected, I could feel my old pattern wanting to kick in, the one where I withdraw when emotions come up. But I'm learning that's just a part of me that learned that emotions were dangerous. You're not my mother, and your feelings aren't dangerous.
Have you noticed moments in your own relationships where you were able to respond from wisdom instead of reactivity? And how did that feel different from your usual patterns?
Share in the comments. These self-leadership moments are worth celebrating.
Through reading We All Have Parts, Ethan learned about something called the window of tolerance, which is the zone where he could feel emotions without getting overwhelmed, hyperarousal, or shutting down, hypoarousal. Ethan told Maya,
I realized I've been living in hypoarousal most of the time. When emotions get intense, I automatically go into shutdown mode. But I'm practicing staying within my window, feeling my feelings without letting them overwhelm me.
Maya's self-led approach was helping Ethan's parts feel safer about staying present during emotional moments. When she didn't flood him with anxiety or make demands, his system could practice staying in connection instead of immediately seeking escape.
As Maya continued her weekly therapy sessions and Ethan continued exploring parts work through books and conversations with Maya, both of their systems began to change. They still had moments where their parts would activate. Healing isn't linear, and parts don't transform overnight. But increasingly, they found themselves able to pause when they felt triggered, get curious about what parts were activated, and choose to respond from self, instead of being hijacked by their protected strategies. Maya learned that herself could comfort her anxious parts.
I see you're scared that Ethan is pulling away. Will you allow me to handle this conversation? I can take this burden from you and care for our relationship without you constantly having to scan for danger.
Ethan learned that his self could stay present with Maya's emotions. I see you're feeling overwhelmed by Maya's feelings, but I'm an adult now, and I can handle emotional conversations without everything falling apart. Maya isn't mom, and her emotions aren't dangerous explosions.
This transformation from parts-led to self-led relationships is what earned security looks like in action. If you know someone who's been struggling with anxious-avoidant relationship patterns, sharing this video might help them see that change is possible, that we can learn to love from wisdom instead of wounds.
Here's what Maya and Ethan discovered that we want you to know. Yourself has been there all along. Every moment of wisdom you've ever had, every time you felt truly compassionate, every instance of creative problem solving, that was yourself leading.
Yourself isn't something you have to develop or earn. It's not a reward for doing enough therapy or reading enough books. It's the essential core of who you are. And it's been waiting patiently for your parts to feel safe enough to let it lead. When Maya's anxious parts step back to let herself leave, she becomes naturally calm, curious, and compassionate, not just with Ethan, but with her own parts.
And when Ethan's shutdown parts relax and let his self lead, he becomes naturally present, clear, and connected, able to stay in relationships even when emotions feel intense.
This is the earned security we've been building toward throughout this entire series. When yourself is leading your inner team, your parts can finally relax and do what they were meant to do. Offer their gifts instead of carrying the burden of keeping you safe. And when both people in a relationship are learning to lead from self, they create the very security their parts have always been seeking.
The transformation we see in Maya and Ethan reflects what neuroscientist Dr. Daniel Siegel calls neural integration, the process by which different brain regions work together harmoniously rather than in isolated reactive patterns. When individuals access what Dr. Richard Schwartz terms the self, brain imaging shows increased activation in the medial prefrontal cortex, the area associated with self-awareness, empathy, and emotional regulation. Dr. Richard Schwartz's research distinguishes between what Freud called the ego, which in IFS understanding is actually a collection of parts trying to control outcomes, and the self, which he described as the essential core of human consciousness, Unlike the ego's controlling nature, self-leadership emerges naturally when protective parts feel safe enough to step back. Studies on what Dr. Sue Johnson calls earned security demonstrate that adults can develop secure attachment patterns even after secure childhoods through experiences that activate the self's natural capacity for co-regulation. When one partner begins responding from self-leadership, it creates what researchers call emotional contagion. The other partner's nervous system begins to regulate in response. Research by Dr. Stephen Porges on polyvagal theory explains Ethan's window of tolerance work. His ability to stay present during emotional intensity reflects activation of the parasympathetic nervous system's social engagement branch, rather than the dorsal vagal shutdown response that characterized his earlier avoidant patterns. Dr. Mary Main's research on reflective functioning shows that when individuals can observe their own internal states with curiosity rather than reactivity, what IFS calls unblending from parts, it literally changes brain structure. The anterior cingulate cortex, associated with self-awareness and empathy, shows increased density in individuals who practice this kind of internal observation. And the most encouraging research comes from studies on neuroplasticity and attachment security. Dr. Philip Shaver's longitudinal studies demonstrate that new experiences of self-led responsiveness can rewire attachment patterns at any age. When individuals experience consistent self-to-self connection, it creates new neural pathways that support earned security rather than defensive protection.
So let's get to the heart of it. Maya and Ethan's story isn't just about two people learning to communicate better or manage their triggers more effectively. It's about two people discovering the wise, loving essence that was there all along, waiting to lead their lives and their love. Maya's self was there during every anxious spiral. Every moment her scanner part was working overtime. Every time her perfectionist part was trying to make her worthy of love. It was just eclipsed by the parts that were working so hard to keep her safe. But self can never be destroyed or damaged, only covered over by protective parts that learned they had to be in charge. When Maya's therapist helped her parts feel safe enough to step back, her self naturally emerged, not as something new she had to create, but as something essential that had always been there. And in self, Maya found that she was naturally calm when her parts used to be anxious, naturally curious when her parts used to be critical, and naturally compassionate when her parts used to be defensive. And Ethan's self was there too. Even during every shutdown, every moment his independence manager insisted he handle everything alone, every time his monitoring manager scanned for emotional threats, his self was there, wanting to stay present with Maya and longing for real intimacy, knowing that Ethan had the capacity to handle emotional intensity without being overwhelmed by it. When Ethan's parts learned that they didn't have to carry the burden of protecting him from another emotional explosion like his mother's, his self could finally step forward. And in self, Ethan found he was naturally connected when his parts used to withdraw, naturally courageous when his parts used to hide, and naturally clear when his parts used to feel confused about emotional needs. This is what I want you to understand about your own self. It's not a goal to achieve or a state to earn. It's who you actually are underneath all that protection. Every moment of genuine love you've ever felt, every time you've been truly present with someone's pain, every instance where you've responded with wisdom instead of reactivity, that was your self leading. Your anxious parts don't need you to disappear for yourself to emerge. Your avoidant parts don't need to be fixed for yourself to lead. They just need to feel safe enough to step back and allow the wise, loving essence of who you are to take the helm. And here's what happens when your self leads in your relationships. You stop trying to control your partner's responses and start trusting your own capacity to handle whatever comes. You stop testing whether love is safe and start creating safety through your own self-led presence. You stop protecting yourself from intimacy and start showing up authentically, knowing that yourself can handle whatever vulnerability brings. Maya's scanner part didn't disappear. It just stopped being the CEO of her relationship. Now it works as a consultant, occasionally offering information to Maya's self, who can decide what to do with that information from a place of wisdom rather than fear. Ethan's shutdown manager didn't disappear either. It just learned that Ethan's self could handle emotional intensity without needing to escape. Now it works as an advisor, letting Ethan know when he's reaching his capacity, so his self can communicate that need clearly instead of just disappearing. This is earned security in action, not the absence of protective parts, but self-leadership that can guide those parts with compassion, wisdom, and strength. When your self is leading, your parts can finally do what they were meant to do, offer their gifts and talents instead of carrying the impossible burden of keeping you safe in love. And when two people are both learning to lead from self, they can create something beautiful. A relationship where parts can be welcomed instead of hidden, where vulnerability feels safe instead of dangerous, where love can grow from abundance rather than fear. If you want help learning to identify the parts that have been driving your relationships and learn how to lead from your capital S self instead, take our free Meet Your Inner Team assessment. When you take the assessment, you'll receive 7 follow-up emails, which will come over the course of 2 weeks in order to give you time to integrate what you're learning. You'll receive practical daily check-in tools for working with your parts from self. The link for the gift we created to help you on your healing journey is in the description. Your self has been waiting for your whole life to lead your relationships with this kind of wisdom and love. It's time to let it.
This concludes our Parts of Love series, but your journey with your inner team is just beginning. Understanding your parts and learning to lead from self is lifelong work that transforms not just your relationships, but every aspect of your life. If you haven't seen this whole series, it's linked here.
And if you've already seen this series and you're ready to dive deeper into attachment healing and creating secure relationships, our Healing Anxious Attachment playlist is linked here. It's full of practical tools and insights to help support your continued growth.
Subscribe and take care of your heart. And remember, you're not alone. We're all in this
Together.